The studio lights blazed like judgment. Across the polished debate table sat two titans, Donald Trump, the former president, leaning back with that signature smirk, and Denzel Washington, calm but burning with purpose. The crowd hummed with anticipation. The topic was patriotism and power, but everyone knew this wasn't about definitions, it was about confrontation. Denzel's gaze locked on Trump's. "You call yourself a patriot," he said, his voice deep and steady, "but what kind of patriot builds an empire on division?" Trump leaned forward, unbothered. "An empire built on strength," he shot back. "Something you Hollywood types will never understand." The tension in the room thickened. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Denzel didn't blink. "Strength isn't tyranny, Mr. President," he replied. "Real strength is serving the people, not yourself." The moderator tried to cut in, but the audience was electrified. Applause erupted from one side, while others booed. The air was combustible. The live chat exploded across screens worldwide. #Denzel vs. Trump was already trending in the first 3 minutes. Then Denzel leaned closer to his mic, voice low, deliberate. "You built towers of gold, but forgot the foundation of truth. That's not patriotism, that's power worship." Trump's smile faded for the first time. He straightened up, eyes narrowing. "You talk about truth," he snapped. "Truth is, without power, your words mean nothing." And with that line, the battle truly began. The room trembled with applause and outrage. Half the audience cheered Trump's defiance, the other half roared at Denzel's courage. The moderator's voice cracked through the noise, "Gentlemen, please." But neither man moved. Trump leaned back, his tone dripping with mockery. "You've played soldiers, preachers, even heroes, Denzel, but this isn't a movie. This is real power." His words echoed like a taunt. Denzel didn't flinch. He waited, letting the silence burn before answering. "You're right," he said finally. "This isn't a movie. In movies, villains usually know when they've gone too far." The crowd gasped. Trump's expression stiffened. "You think you can lecture me about power?" Trump snapped. "I built this country's confidence when the rest of the world laughed at it." "Confidence?" Denzel replied, his voice gaining force. "You built fear. You divided neighbors. You taught people to see enemies where there were none. And you called it leadership." Trump pounded the desk. "I brought jobs. I brought pride. I stood up to the establishment that tried to control every single American." His voice thundered, shaking the studio lights. Denzel didn't back down. "And yet you became the establishment. You replaced truth with loyalty oaths. Patriotism isn't about worshipping a man, it's about protecting the ideals that built this nation. Freedom, justice, unity." The moderator gestured frantically for a break, but the crowd refused to calm. Some stood, chanting. Others recorded, knowing this would be replayed 1,000,000 times before the night was over. Then Denzel added, his tone cutting through the chaos like a blade, "You've mistaken power for purpose, Mr. Trump. A patriot fights for people. A tyrant fights for himself." The words hit hard. Even Trump, for a moment, said nothing. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with something between anger and recognition. The battle lines were drawn, not between two men, but between two visions of America. The tension in the studio could be sliced with a knife. The lights above flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the debate stage. Denzel took a deep breath, his voice steady but carrying the weight of generations. "You talk about building America," he said, fixing his eyes on Trump. "But you built walls, walls between rich and poor, white and black, truth and lies. You built an empire of noise while people begged to be heard." Trump smirked, waving a dismissive hand. "You think speeches change things? You Hollywood types love to talk about problems, but when it's time to act, you hide behind scripts and applause." Denzel stepped forward, the crowd sensing he was done holding back. "Act?" he thundered. "I've lived through the stories you call scripts. I've seen the mothers crying over sons who never came home. I've seen men lose everything while the powerful played politics. That's not fiction. That's America bleeding in real time. Trump's grin faded. You think you've got me figured out, huh? You think I don't know pain? I fought every damn day against people who wanted me destroyed. They called me every name in the book. But I'm still standing. That's strength. Strength without compassion, Denzel shot back, is just domination. You mistake control for courage. You confuse applause for respect. The audience erupted again, divided like the nation itself. Phones lit up as millions tuned in online, hashtags exploding across every platform, hashtag Denzel versus Trump, hashtag Patriot or Power. Trump leaned into the mic, his voice lower, colder. You can't shame me, Denzel. I've faced the press, the courts, and the swamp. You're an actor pretending to be righteous. Denzel looked him dead in the eye. And you're a politician pretending to be innocent. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the moderator couldn't find his voice. The camera zoomed in on both men, one fueled by conviction, the other by ego. The world was watching, and no one dared to look away. The air inside the studio thickened like a storm before it breaks. Neither man blinked. Denzel stood tall, his expression a mix of sorrow and steel. The audience could feel it. This wasn't just another debate. It was an autopsy of America's soul. You talk about making America great again, Denzel began, his tone quieter now, almost reflective. But do you even know what greatness means? It's not gold towers, or chants at rallies. Greatness is sacrifice. It's justice. It's the janitor who shows up every morning, the nurse who works double shifts, the teacher who buys supplies from her own pocket. That's America, not the empire you built around yourself. Trump leaned forward, his voice booming. I gave them jobs. I gave them pride. When I was in charge, this country stood strong. You think lectures about feelings feed families? My America worked. Denzel's jaw tightened. Your America obeyed. People didn't stand tall, they stayed silent, afraid to lose their place. You didn't give them pride, you sold them fear dressed as patriotism. The moderator shifted nervously as the tension grew unbearable. The crowd gasped when Denzel stepped closer to Trump's podium, his eyes burning. You say you fight for the people, but you only fight for power. Tell me, Donald, when did the flag become your logo? Trump straightened, his face turning red. Don't lecture me about patriotism. I've done more for this country than any of you moral preachers. The flag is mine because I fought for it. Denzel shook his head slowly. You didn't fight for the flag. You branded it. You turned unity into merchandise. A murmur spread through the audience. Some applauded, others booed. The atmosphere was electric, raw, alive. Cameras zoomed in as Denzel's voice rose. America doesn't need kings. It needs conscience. And you, sir, lost yours chasing applause. Trump gripped the podium, his knuckles white. The words had hit their mark. Online, the reaction was instant. Clips flooded every feed, headlines blazed. Denzel versus Trump, the battle for America's soul. The world wasn't watching a debate anymore. It was witnessing a reckoning. The studio lights burned brighter as if reflecting the heat between them. The crowd was holding its breath, phones were up, live streams exploding online. This wasn't politics anymore, it was a collision between two versions of America. Trump slammed his hand on the podium. You don't get it, Denzel. People loved me because I told them the truth. They were tired of lies, tired of weakness. I gave them their voice back. Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned in, calm but razor sharp. No, you gave them someone to shout at. You didn't return their voice, you hijacked it. There's a difference between leadership and manipulation. A mix of gasps and cheers rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed closer. Trump sneered, you think you're better because you read lines for a living? You act for a camera. I built the show. The jab landed, but Denzel's smirk was cold and deliberate. You're right, he said softly. You built the show. But the problem is, America's tired of watching. The audience erupted. A wave of applause crashed through the room while Trump raised his voice, trying to drown it out. Fake patriot. You talk big, but when the cameras go off, you'll be back in your mansion lecturing people who actually work. Denzel took a single step closer, voice low, thunderous. When the cameras go off, I'll still be a man who can sleep at night. Can you say the same? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Trump froze for a split second before forcing a strained grin. Sleep? I don't sleep. I build. I win. Denzel's reply came like a hammer. Then maybe that's why you've forgotten how to feel. The words echoed through the hall. Commentators backstage whispered frantically into their mics, anchors interrupted live feeds. Twitter, TikTok, every corner of the internet exploded with one clip, Denzel's quiet fury. Then maybe that's why you've forgotten how to feel. A sentence that felt less like dialogue and more like a mirror held up to power. The tension hit a breaking point. Denzel's last words still hung in the air, sharp and unshakable. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half booing, the studio shaking under the noise. Cameras panned wildly as producers yelled through headsets. Trump leaned in, his face tight with anger. You talk about feelings like they pay the bills, he snapped. I made America rich again, not weak. Denzel raised his hand, his tone cutting through the chaos. Rich? You're counting dollars while the people count days, days until rent, until food, until hope runs out. You built towers, not trust. The crowd gasped. Trump's jaw locked. You don't understand what it takes to lead, he fired back. I understand what it takes to care, Denzel replied, his voice steady. That's something no amount of gold can buy. A deep silence spread. Even Trump's supporters went quiet. The camera zoomed in on Denzel's face, calm, resolute, unafraid. He didn't need to shout, the truth had already landed like a thunderclap. Trump straightened his tie, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The media loves this, he barked, pointing toward the cameras. They want chaos. They want drama. And you, Denzel, you're their favorite actor in this circus. Denzel didn't flinch. Maybe, he said coolly, but you're the ringmaster who sold the tickets. The audience roared, laughter, gasps, applause all blending into one electric hum. Trump's smirk wavered for a second. You think you know what real leadership looks like? I've been under fire from every side, and I'm still standing. That's not strength, Denzel replied, his tone measured yet razor-sharp. That's survival, and it's built on the backs of people who can't afford to fall. Trump leaned forward, jabbing his finger toward Denzel. You don't speak for the people. I don't need to, Denzel shot back, eyes locked on him. They're already speaking, you just stopped listening. For a heartbeat, the studio went silent. Even the stage lights seemed to dim. Then came a single clap, then another, until the entire audience was on its feet. The director's voice crackled over the speakers, "We're live, gentlemen." But the real show had already begun, and this time, the world was watching not for spectacle, but for truth. Within hours, the confrontation dominated every screen in America. Cable news replayed the exchange on loop. Maybe you're the ringmaster who sold the tickets, became the line of the night. On social media, hashtags like hashtag Denzel vs. Trump and hashtag the ringmaster moment trended worldwide. Conservative pundits called Denzel disrespectful, accusing him of grandstanding for applause. Liberal commentators hailed him as the only man in Hollywood brave enough to look power in the eye. Memes flooded the internet, split images of Denzel's piercing stare against Trump's stiff smirk, captions reading, "The actor who told the truth," and "The businessman who lost the crowd." But outside the noise, something deeper stirred. Across cities, people gathered in coffee shops and classrooms, arguing not about who won, but what the debate revealed. Some saw Denzel's words as a wake-up call, that leadership without empathy was no leadership at all. Others viewed Trump's defiance as proof of his resilience, his refusal to bow even under moral fire. That night, Denzel refused interviews. When asked by a reporter outside the studio if he regretted his words, he paused before replying quietly, you don't regret telling the truth. You regret waiting too long to say it. The quote spread faster than any headline, becoming a rallying cry, "The truth doesn't wait." By dawn, the political aftershocks had reached Washington. The White House press corps buzzed with one question: will Trump respond officially to Denzel Washington's attack? Anonymous aides claimed the former president was furious, calling the actor a Hollywood fraud trying to play hero. Others said he was secretly enjoying the attention. Meanwhile, the public response split the nation in two. On one side, Denzel was being hailed as America's moral compass, his calm fury replayed in classrooms, talk shows, and podcasts dissecting every line. On the other, Trump supporters framed him as the last man standing against elite hypocrisy. His campaign store even launched a new shirt overnight, "Still the Patriot." Major networks booked emergency panels. Analysts debated whether this moment would reshape the cultural divide or simply deepen it. Hashtags evolved into movements, #Truth Over Power, #Hollywood Speaks, and #The Patriot versus the Power. Then came the twist. Denzel released a short statement online, only 15 words long. Power is nothing without purpose. And purpose dies when truth becomes optional. The post shattered records, 20 million shares in 12 hours. Even those who disagreed couldn't ignore it. Newspapers called it the line that shook the election year. Across America, a new question took hold: was this a debate about politics, or the soul of the nation itself? The studio lights were long off, but the echoes of that night still haunted America. Analysts called it the debate that split the nation. Denzel Washington, once seen as an actor, now stood as something more, a voice that refused to be quieted. Trump, still defiant, doubled down on his message of strength, claiming that no actor, no elite, no one from Hollywood could ever define what patriotism truly means. But the public wasn't the same anymore. People rewatched the broadcast like it was history in motion, a turning point between entertainment and truth. Universities began dissecting it in media ethics classes. Talk shows couldn't stop replaying that one line: "Power is nothing without purpose." Protesters filled city squares with banners quoting both men. Some held signs that read, "Denzel for the people." Others shouted, "Trump forever." What began as a televised debate had transformed into a cultural battleground, a collision between conviction and control. In the final analysis, neither man won that night. But something deeper awakened in the crowd that watched, an understanding that truth, power, and patriotism can no longer exist in the same room without a fight. The screen faded to black, and across social media, one phrase trended for days. "The Patriot and the Power, America decides what comes next." The studio lights were long off, but the echoes of that night still haunted America. Analysts called it the debate that split the nation. Denzel Washington, once seen as an actor, now stood as something more, a voice that refused to be quieted. Trump, still defiant, doubled down on his message of strength, claiming that no actor, no elite, no one from Hollywood could ever define what patriotism truly means. But the public wasn't the same anymore. People rewatched the broadcast like it was history in motion, a turning point between entertainment and truth. Universities began dissecting it in media ethics classes. Talk shows couldn't stop replaying that one line: "Power is nothing without purpose." Protesters filled city squares with banners quoting both men. Some held signs that read, "Denzel for the people." Others shouted, "Trump forever." What began as a televised debate had transformed into a cultural battleground, a collision between conviction and control. In the final analysis, neither man won that night. But something deeper awakened in the crowd that watched, an understanding that truth, power, and patriotism can no longer exist in the same room without a fight. The screen faded to black, and across social media, one phrase trended for days. "The Patriot and the Power, America decides what comes next." Tonight wasn't about politics, it was about power, truth, and the soul of America. Maybe we'll never agree on who's right, but one thing's clear, the people are watching, and this time, they won't look away. Power fades. Truth doesn't.